Day 61 in the war with Hamas in Gaza, there are intense and ongoing maneuvers in the north and south of the terrorist enclave. And IDF Chief Hit Tel Aviv says the operation has moved into Phase 3. More from IlTV's Steve Leibovitz.
IDF troops are fighting simultaneously, advancing in the center of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza while overrunning Hamas headquarters in Jabalia in the north. The IDF pushed deeper into Jabalia in northern Gaza Strip with a 551st Reserve Brigade and the Navy's Shayetet 13 Commando Unit raiding Hamas's General Security Headquarters. IDF troops encircled the city, and the 162nd Division are operating in Jabalia to destroy remaining Hamas assets. IDF tanks pushed ahead with expanding its ground offensive into the center of Khan Yunis, where it believes much of the Hamas leadership is hiding. IDF Chief Halevi said that the ongoing battles on the ground are the heaviest since the start of the war 61 days ago.
בחלוף 60 ימים מפרוץ הלחימה, כוחותינו מחתרים את מרחב ח'אן יונס בדרום הרצועה. אנחנו ממשיכים במקביל להעמיק את ההישג גם בצפון הרצועה.
The army chief said the IDF had entered the third phase of the war to destroy Hamas.
עברנו בימים האחרונים לשלב השלישי של התמרון, השתלטנו על מעוזים רבים של החמאס בצפון הרצועה, וכעת אנחנו פועלים מול מרכזי הכובד שלו בדרום.
Meanwhile, Israel's key ally, the United States, is cautioning Israel to do more to avoid civilian casualties as operations shift to the south, where many Gazans have taken refuge after fleeing the devastated north. They are also demanding that Israel allow in more fuel. Israel has allowed ample humanitarian aid, including fuel, to enter Gaza, but much of the international assistance has been stolen by Hamas and used to sustain the terrorist group.
They deny the kidnapping of our children, the murder of our grandchildren, the rape of our daughters. The new Nazis we face today will stop at nothing to destroy civilization as we know it. The World Jewish Congress was created exactly for these times like this, so every Jew can fall asleep at night knowing they are safe in their own home. We are a voice for the Jewish people everywhere. We are the World Jewish Congress.
And joining us now with more on the IDF operation in Gaza is Major General in the Reserves, Gershon HaKohen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. All the best to all of us.
Indeed. Now, the IDF Chief of Staff has said that the IDF has moved into Phase 3. So what exactly does this phase entail, and how many more phases should we expect?
Actually, war is not an engineering project. It means that in comparing it to an engineering project, we are trying to speak about stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, that we can really plan every stage. And troops in the field are really operated according to a plan with stage 1, stage 2. But there are a lot of chaotic elements that making all this, speaking about the difference between one stage to another, to be quite intervening between each other. But actually speaking practically, stage 1 of that war was before the offensive. After 7th of October, to just try to reorganize the defensive lines, to reorganize the troops. It took really several weeks, 3 weeks actually. And then stage 2 was the beginning of the offensive to the north side of Gaza. Now, after the ceasefire, we are entering to another stage. Actually, it is another operation with different constraints. For example, we are aware about constraints expected by United States regarding uninvolved civilians in Khan Yunis, because a lot, almost 1 million of refugees came from the north side of Gaza to the south side. So now all the circumstances are different. So the new stage is really defined by new circumstances and new constraints. Therefore, it is true to speak about another stage of the whole war, but actually troops practically are entering to Khan Yunis, entering to other places in which we can find Hamas battalions, and they are engaging with them to defeat them.
Absolutely. So how close is Israel to victory? And can Hamas even be truly destroyed? It's an ideology as well. The prime minister has likened it to the Nazis or to ISIS. So can it be entirely eliminated? And what does Israel need to do in order to say we have achieved victory?
It is an essential question. We cannot really find an absolute answer for it, but we can really expect that without the organization of Hamas, the ideological elements are less threatening Israel. So we are trying to destroy the way in which these ideological elements coming to be a strategic power, well-equipped, well-trained to struggle against Israel, to make a threat against Tel Aviv in whatever time they want it.
Now, you made comments this week that the Yom Kippur War, which also caught Israel by surprise and posed an existential threat to the state, was less difficult than what we are facing now. I mean, what did you mean by that? Maybe you can elaborate.
Of course. First of all, it is speaking not about the burden and the challenge to the soldiers. It is speaking about the decision makers' challenge. The strategical embarrassment. Just to begin with, everyone is aware about the huge tension between the necessity to destroy Hamas in the battlefield and on the other side, the expected idea that we must bring back all the hostages. And as long as they are in a tension between them, we must synchronize between them. This is a challenge for the leadership. And that kind of tension was not at all really happened in the 73 war. Of course, we had prisoners of war, but it was soldiers, not children, women, etc. So it is absolutely different story regarding that, and this is really what designs the main shock of this war. It is a shock that we will have to deal with it for decades of years.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope that we can achieve victory soon. Major General Gershon Cohen, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you very much. And we are all wishing to better days.
Better days. And as the heavy fighting in Gaza continues, the IDF today announced the names of 2 more soldiers who have been killed. Major General in the Reserves Yonatan Malka, 23, from Beersheba, a soldier in the 7th Armored Brigade's 82nd Battalion, fell in the battle in the Gaza Strip. And Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves Yochai Gul Hirschberg, 52, was commander of the unit to locate missing persons in the 98th Division. He was killed in a military car accident in southern Israel. And on Tuesday, the IDF released the names of 2 additional soldiers who fell in combat in the Gaza Strip, 24-year-old Captain Yachel Gazit and 34-year-old Sergeant in the Reserves Gil Daniels. The announcement brings to 14 the number of soldiers killed since the renewal of the ground operation in Gaza at the start of the week. May their memories be a blessing. Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple. And moving on, there are still 138 hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. Last night, Prime Minister and his security cabinet met with the families and with hostages that had already been released. It was an intense meeting, and new details emerged of the hostages' time in captivity and of sexual allegations. Let's take a look.
The Associated Press revealed on Wednesday that at least 10 of the Israelis released by Hamas, both men and women, were sexually assaulted or abused during their time in captivity. The report quoted a doctor who treated some of the released hostages, who spoke on condition of anonymity to protect the victims' identities. This is the latest account in a string of testimonies and mounting evidence of the sexual atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th and since with hostages. On Tuesday evening, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the cases of sexual abuse and rapes and criticized international human rights organizations for their silence, sending them a clear message.
I say to the women's rights organizations, to the human rights organizations, you've heard of the rape of Israeli women? Horrible atrocities, sexual mutilation? Where the hell are you? I expect all civilized leaders, governments, nations to speak up against this atrocity.
Prior to these statements on Tuesday, the Prime Minister and members of his war cabinet met with some of the released hostages and family members. According to leaked recordings of the meeting to Israeli media, some of the released hostages confirmed the sexual assault. Aviva Sigal, who was freed from Hamas captivity last week and whose husband is still being held hostage, reportedly said during the meeting that some of the women were being touched. The meeting was tense as families of the hostages demanded the government do more to secure their release, with one family member saying time was running out.
And even amid major IDF ground operations in northern and southern Gaza, terrorist rocket fire into southern and central Israel is continuing. Barrages of rockets struck Tel Aviv and Ashkelon with injuries and damages reported. More from IlTV's William Sharon.
The latest barrage of rockets fired by Hamas from Gaza reached north to central Tel Aviv. Air raid sirens in the greater Tel Aviv area sent hundreds of thousands to seek shelter. A few direct hits were reported. Sharpel hitting a school, a main street, and the beach. One man reportedly sustained moderate injuries. Also, a rocket sharpel was found in the classroom of a school in Ganei Tikva, a suburb of Tel Aviv. In this video, two pedestrians luckily escaped injury from a rocket fragments on a Tel Aviv street. Closer to Gaza, terror rockets struck a residential building in Ashkelon. Two older women were lightly wounded by sharpel and were taken to a nearby hospital. Fortunately, most of the residents were either not at home or sheltered. Authorities are reminding civilians that rocket fire is continuing, and they should obey the warning system and seek shelter when required. Palestinian terrorists have fired more than 11,500 rockets towards Israeli territory since Hamas launched a war against the Jewish state on October 7th.
And in the north, Hezbollah continued its provocations with rocket fire into Israel and harsh Israeli retaliation that included the accidental killing of the first Lebanese soldier since the start of the conflict. More from IlTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Air raid sirens sounded in numerous communities along Israel's northern border from cross-border Hezbollah rocket fire, including the city of Kiryat Shmona. There were some damages, but no injuries reported. In a separate incident, a hostile drone entered Israeli airspace from Lebanon and crashed near Moshav Margaliot. Israeli forces converged on the site to recover the UAV, and sappers examined the device. Israeli Air Force fighters retaliated by hitting Hezbollah assets. The strikes targeted observation posts, weapons depots, and other sites. The IDF expressed regret for killing a Lebanese soldier while striking what it believed was a Hezbollah-linked target. This was the first such death of a Lebanese soldier since cross-border hostilities began in early October. The incident reportedly occurred in Adaiseh, when the IDF apparently thought it was striking Hezbollah operatives. 3 Lebanese soldiers were reportedly wounded. Even as the rocket fire continues, Defense Minister Gallant has established a directorate to restore security to northern Israel. Northern communities within 4 kilometers of the border have been evacuated of civilians since the middle of October. Northern Horizon will work to strengthen security measures in communities close to the Lebanese border to lay the groundwork for tens of thousands of displaced people to return home. Gallant on Tuesday announced the new directorate, saying it will focus on strengthening security along Israel's northern front. Skirmishes with Hezbollah and other groups on the northern border led to the decision to evacuate residents of dozens of northern communities with no indication of when they would be able to return home.
And since October 7th and Israel's war against Hamas, anti-Semitism has surged on U.S. college campuses. And so on Tuesday, the U.S. Congress took the matter into its own hands, questioning the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and the University of Pennsylvania in a House hearing. Let's take a look. Jewish students' reports of harassment on college campuses and pro-Palestinian protests were at the center of a congressional hearing of the House Education and Workforce Committee. The presidents of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the University of Pennsylvania, and Harvard University refused to testify that calling for the genocide of Jews violates their campus's rules of harassment.
Dr. Kornbluth, yes. At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
yes
speech
or
becomes
no?
If the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The president of Harvard gave similar answers and refused to say it was against Harvard's rules, and the committee members were not impressed.
Do you know what the #1 hate crime in America is?
I know that over the last couple of months, there has been an alarming rise of anti-Semitism, which I understand is the critical topic that we are here to discuss.
That's correct. It is anti-Jewish hate crimes. And Harvard ranks the lowest when it comes to protecting Jewish students. This is why I've called for your resignation, and your testimony today, not being able to answer with moral clarity, speaks volumes. I yield back.
The university presidents did acknowledge that anti-Semitism was a serious problem on their campuses, but none were able to offer any answers regarding concrete solutions to address the problem.
We have work to do. I agree.
Well, I keep hearing that. I think you have a need for leadership or a need of federal intervention to cut off the resources that allow this this mission that's failed to continue.
And the COP28 United Nations Climate Change Conference is underway in Dubai. It is the largest international climate conference of the year, and in normal times, Israeli experts would be focused on the range of crucial issues on the agenda. But this year, the Israeli delegation is also focused on bringing international attention to the hostages held by Hamas. And joining us now from the COP28 in Dubai is Aviva Steinberger, the Director of Innovation Diplomacy at Startup Nation Central. Aviva, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So about the COP28 conference, this was supposed to open the news broadcast. It's a major global conference, and unfortunately, given the situation here in Israel, that hasn't been the case. And so I would be interested to hear from you at the conference about the conference itself and Israel's participation and contribution to this global challenge.
Yeah, so this was supposed to be Israel's largest delegation at a COP ever. We were expecting probably hundreds of Israeli startups to join in the official delegation and side delegations. And because of what's happening in Israel, understandably, many startups could not come, would not come. Today there are probably about 24, if not even fewer, 20 companies that are here at COP. And Israel's contribution to COP and the climate conversation in general is really about the innovation angle. We are known, obviously, as a startup nation, and Startup Nation Central has been working with many of the startups in the climate tech sector. There are over 700 of them. But beyond even the innovative companies and the startups in Israel that identify as climate tech companies, there can be and are so many others whose technologies can be adapted to bring positive impact to the impacts of climate change, whether it be climate mitigation or adaptation to climate challenges. And so the sector is really a growing one, and we feel very confident that Israel has a lot to contribute on the global stage.
And so what specifically is Startup Nation Central doing at the COP28?
We've been building up to COP28 since COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and really looking at COP in this region as an opportunity to go deep on Israel's contribution. And so Startup Nation Central has two main goals at this year's COP. One is harnessing the relationships that we've been building over the last year. Startup Nation Central is an official observer organization. That was status that was granted this year here at the COP. And we've been working with organizations in the United States, corporates across the country, and also globally. And so our idea is to give the voice of Israeli technology a global platform and really help gain access to those global players. So that's on the one hand, that's one goal is harnessing those relationships. And the other, especially given the situation now, is to give as much visibility and as much voice to the Israeli tech ecosystem in as many of those platforms as possible. So we've had 7 different activations throughout the week on global stages, primary global stages in front of COP presidency audiences, tech and innovation hub stages, and the UN climate stages. And so it's really impactful when the 20 companies that are here have access to those kinds of audiences.
And can you maybe share some of the reactions you're receiving as Israelis today at the COP? I mean, you mentioned some of the startups were afraid. Were you at all afraid to travel there in light of the situation? I mean, maybe you could share a little bit about your experiences.
I wouldn't say I was afraid. I was certainly concerned, hesitant about leaving home, certainly. But being here seemed to have significant importance and relevance to sharing the Israel message. And so coming to COP had its, I was hesitant, but the host country has been very welcoming and has made it so that I think all of us feel quite safe being here. Reactions when talking to people, and you meet thousands of people here at all of the different events throughout the 2 weeks, has probably been more of curiosity than anything else. And so just by starting conversation of, hey, where are you from, turns into a conversation where you really can engage on some interesting issues. And I would say that when you put climate and climate change and climate innovation at the start of that conversation, a lot of opportunities open up for relating from a values perspective of what is it that we're trying to accomplish together, because climate change is not a political conversation. We're all dealing with the same challenges, and climate innovation is a door opener.
Absolutely. Well, Aviva Steinberger, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say on behalf of Startup Nation Central and the strong team, I'm not here alone. There are a bunch of us who are here making these things happen. We appreciate it.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Rainy showers are expected around most of the country tonight, with lows of around 14 degrees Celsius or 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, cloudy skies expected and temperatures reaching highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 69 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.